I found this at the back of the closet, a box of letters I never answered. My hands, spotted and wrinkled from 77 years of work, feel the fine grit of dust coating the shoebox-sized cardboard. It's light, deceptively so. You'd think the weight of 3 decades of silence would be heavier. I pull it into the light of the cluttered room, dust motes dancing in the sunbeam like tiny, frantic ghosts. These aren't old love letters. They're not forgotten birthday cards or news from distant family. No, these were from people who asked for my help. A former colleague looking for a reference, a young man from my church asking for advice on starting a business, a neighbor needing a hand with a project, simple requests. I read them, felt that familiar twinge of obligation, and then I just put them in this box. I pretended I hadn't seen them. I slid the box into the darkness and let it sit. This box has been sitting there for 32 years. When I started to declutter my house at 77, I thought the enemy was going to be junk. I thought I was going to fight dust and memories, maybe shed a tear over an old photograph or two. I didn't expect to find myself waiting for me in the dark corners of my own home. I certainly didn't expect to be confronted by the man I was 30 years ago, the man who chose silence over a simple, kind no or a difficult yes. That box isn't just paper, it's a monument to my own avoidance. It makes me wonder, do you have something like this? Something you know you should have dealt with years ago? You don't have to explain it. Just tell me if you do in the comments. I wasn't looking for a life lesson when I opened this closet door. I was just trying to make some space. But what I found was a map of my own cowardice. In this video, I'm going to tell you what else I found in my home and what I was finally forced to do about it. The spare bedroom was where good intentions went to die. It was a silent room except for the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the sound of my own breathing, shallow and tight. The afternoon sun cut a single sharp line through the dusty air, and a million tiny particles danced in it like ghosts having a party I wasn't invited to. I started by trying to move a stack of old magazines. The paper was brittle, and they smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten time. My back protested. I tried to sort a pile of old clothes, but the sheer volume of it just paralyzed me. It felt like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. I was surrounded, defeated before I'd even really begun. Then I saw it shoved under an old desk, a large plastic tote sealed with yellowed tape. I thought, finally, something simple. Tax records, probably. I dragged it into the center of the room, the plastic groaning against the wooden floor. I sliced the tape with my pocket knife and lifted the lid. The smell that rose up wasn't just old paper and plastic, it was the smell of my own cowardice. There were no tax records. Instead, I found the partnership dissolution papers for the business I started with my best friend. I'd spent 30 years telling myself he was the one who walked away, but there it was, in my own handwriting, a list of my fears, disguised as business concerns. Beneath that, a stack of photos of another friend, a man I'd cut out of my life over a stupid, prideful argument. He was smiling in every picture. I could almost feel the phantom limb of that friendship ache in my chest. And at the very bottom, a rolled-up blueprint for the woodworking shop I dreamed of at 40. I sat there on the floor, the cold weight of it all settling in my stomach. These weren't things. These were receipts for a life I didn't live. My brother-in-law, Frank, came by last Tuesday. He stood in the doorway of the spare room where I had piles sorted into keep, toss, and God only knows. And he just shook his head, a look of pity on his face. Frank's house is the kind of place where you're afraid to put a glass down without a coaster. It's all white walls and gleaming chrome, not a single photograph on the mantelpiece. He once boasted to me, with genuine pride, that he could fit his entire life into 2 suitcases, as if that were some grand prize at the end of it all. "Arthur, you just need to get a dumpster," he said, making this little sweeping motion with his hand, like he was brushing away a fly, or maybe my entire past. He'd done it himself years ago after his wife passed. Threw it all out. Pictures, letters, her old gardening tools. He called it starting fresh. But looking at him standing there so light and unburdened, I realized he hadn't started fresh at all. He'd just erased the evidence. He had no boxes, it's true, but he had nothing to learn from either. He wasn't free. He was empty. Frank left, and I just sat there on the floor for a long time, the dust settling around me again in the quiet of that room, and in that silence something finally clicked into place. It was a thought so simple, so obvious I couldn't believe it had taken me 77 years to have it. Frank was wrong. I was wrong. The problem wasn't the stuff. It was never about the stuff. The boxes, the broken tools, the old clothes, they were just the symptoms. The disease was something quieter, heavier. It was the accumulated weight of 1,000 decisions I hadn't made, 100 conversations I'd avoided, a dozen versions of myself I'd packed away because I was too scared to live them out. I realized you can't clean up a house when the real mess is inside you. So I stopped trying to attack the clutter with brute force. Instead, I started a different kind of work. I didn't get a dumpster to erase the evidence. I developed a new set of rules. Simple rules for sorting through a life, not just a room. My first rule was born from pure exhaustion. In the beginning, I tried to attack the house like it was an enemy army. I'd declare war on the spare room on a Saturday morning, full of coffee and resolve, only to be standing in the hallway at 8 o'clock that night, defeated. I'd be surrounded by 4 different piles of chaos, a sharp pain shooting up my lower back, with the metallic taste of failure in my mouth. The mess was always bigger at the end of the day than when I'd started. It was a demoralizing, soul-crushing cycle. So I surrendered. I gave up on winning the war in a day and decided to try winning just one small battle. I called it the one-box rule. 1 hour, 1 box. That's it. Some days it was a junk drawer. Some days a shoebox of old receipts. It didn't matter. It turned an impossible mountain into a series of small, manageable stones. You can't build a new life in a day, but you can clear 1 box. The next rule came to me in my old office, a room I hadn't used in 10 years. I was sorting through the desk drawers and I pulled out this heavy chrome stapler. It was broken, hadn't worked since the late 90s. I was about to toss it, but my hand stopped. I realized I was keeping it and a dozen other things like it, dried up pens, obsolete computer cables, brittle manila folders, for a single ridiculous reason. They were evidence. They were proof that I was once a busy man, an important man who stapled important things. It wasn't an object with a purpose. It was a totem to a past self. So my second rule became a question I had to ask every single item. Are you an object or are you evidence? The moment I started throwing out the evidence, I felt a weight lift that had nothing to do with the clutter. It felt like I'd finally resigned from a job I didn't even know I was still trying to hold on to. This new clarity led to my third rule, which was about motion. I found a whole shelf of books my daughter left behind when she moved out for college. That was over 20 years ago. In a dusty crate in the garage, I found a set of woodworking tools I'd borrowed from my neighbor Bill right before he passed away. These things weren't mine. They were the physical and emotional property of other people, just squatting in my house and in my head. I realized a surprising amount of my clutter wasn't even my own story. So I boxed up my daughter's books. I could see her teenage handwriting on the inside cover of one, a little heart drawn next to her name. I called her and we had a laugh about it. I donated Bill's tools to the local high school's shop class in his name. The rule was simple. Return what isn't yours. The act of returning things to their rightful owners, whether literal or symbolic, cleared more space than a dumpster ever could. Then came the hardest things. Not the junk, but the treasures. The blueprints for the woodworking shop I dreamed of at 40. I unrolled them on the floor, the old paper crackling, releasing the faint papery smell of my younger self's ambition. My first instinct was to ask the usual question, should I keep this? But it was a dead end. It was just a yes or no that didn't solve the ache in my chest, so I tried a new question, a stranger one. What is this object asking of me? I sat there and listened. The blueprints weren't asking to be framed. They weren't asking to be built. They were asking me to forgive the man who was too scared to build them. They were asking me to make peace with my own fear. Once I did that, I didn't need the paper anymore. What's one object in your home that's asking something of you? I'd be interested to hear about it. After that, I needed something brutally practical again. The emotional work was draining. I noticed that no matter how much I cleared out, new clutter always found a way in. The main entry point was the kitchen counter. It was a graveyard for junk mail, bills, newspapers, and receipts that I promised myself I'd deal with later. I'd put a coffee mug down and it would make this sticky, tearing sound as it lifted a week-old electric bill. The sheer inertia of it was suffocating. That's when I created the touch it once mandate. If a piece of mail or a paper came into the house, I had to deal with it right then and there. Open it, file it, pay it, or throw it in the recycling bin. No more putting it down. It was agonizing at first, like trying to teach an old dog a new trick, but it stopped the bleeding. Later is the most crowded and neglected room in the house. This focus on the present led me to another closet and another ghost. Behind a stack of old blankets, I found a brand new fishing vest, its tag still on, and a complete set of Italian language learning books and cassette tapes. I had bought them all the year I retired for a future I had painted in my head. A future where I'd spend long, leisurely days by a river and then take a trip to Tuscany, charming the locals with my fluent Italian. But my back isn't what it used to be, and I never did get past ciao. For years, seeing these things filled me with a quiet guilt. They were a monument to a future that wasn't going to arrive. Letting them go was a different kind of release. It wasn't about failure, it was about accepting the beauty of my actual life, right here, now. It was a relief from the pressure of having to be a person I was never going to be. Of course, this process made me realize that not everything is a ghost. Some things are anchors. I was following Frank's all-or-nothing advice for a while, just tossing things into black garbage bags. But then I found a small, smooth river stone at the bottom of a junk drawer. It was cool to the touch, and holding it, I was instantly back on a riverbank with my son, who was 6 years old, and so proud he'd found this perfectly round rock for me. It was just a rock, but it wasn't evidence, and it wasn't a future I failed to live. It was a memory. I realized I needed a middle ground between being a hoarder and being an eraser of my own history. So I got one beautiful cedar-lined box. This became the memory box. Only the purest, most essential memories went in there. Not all weight is a burden. Sometimes it's what keeps you from floating away. That cedar box gave me an idea for the other kind of memory, the painful kind. The partnership dissolution papers, the pictures of the friend I'd lost to my own pride. My first instinct was to burn them, to destroy the evidence of my own foolishness. But that felt too much like what Frank did. It felt like another act of avoidance. So I did something different. I took those papers, those photos, and I put them into a single manila folder. I didn't read them again. I just held them. Felt the sharp, unforgiving edge of the staples, and acknowledged the pain they represented. Then I took a black marker and wrote one word on the tab. Forgiven. I didn't forgive them. I forgave me. Then I put the file in the very back of my filing cabinet. Is there a memory you've been avoiding? You don't have to share the details, just tell me if you know the one I'm talking about. With the big emotional battles underway, I still had to deal with the simple physics of life. A house, left to its own devices, will always return to chaos. I was terrified that all my hard work would be undone in a few months. The thought of having to do another massive purge was too much to bear. The resistance I felt was the old idea that if I couldn't spend a whole afternoon cleaning, it wasn't worth starting. So I bought a simple kitchen timer. Every night around 7:30, I set it for 20 minutes. For those 20 minutes, I just put things away. I put the newspaper in the recycling, the dishes in the dishwasher, the book back on the shelf. The steady, unjudging tick of that timer became my companion. It wasn't about deep cleaning. It was about resetting the day. You don't have to conquer the mountain every single day. You just have to keep the path clear. The very last habit was the hardest, and it came to me while holding an old, worn-out wool sweater. My wife, Eleanor, had given it to me for Christmas 30 years ago. It was full of holes, hopelessly stretched out, but I could never bring myself to get rid of it. As I held it, I could still smell the cedar from the chest it was stored in, and underneath that, I imagined the faint phantom scent of her perfume. Getting rid of it felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was throwing her away. And then I understood the love wasn't in the sweater. The sweater was just the vessel for the love. So I started a little ritual for these sacred objects. I'd hold each one, and I'd say out loud, "Thank you for your service." Then I'd say goodbye. I was separating the memory from the thing, and I found that when I let the thing go, the memory got lighter, easier to carry. The love was never in the object to begin with. I spent most of my life thinking a house was just a container, a big wooden box where you put your things. I see now that I had it all backward. A house isn't a container for your furniture or your clothes. It's a container for your decisions. Every single object you see, that broken chair in the corner, that book you never read, that dusty box in the closet, it represents a choice. The choice to acquire it, the choice to keep it, and most powerfully, the choice to ignore it. And when you refuse to decide, the object doesn't just sit there. It becomes a little monument to your hesitation, a quiet accusation. And all those monuments, they build walls around you until you're living in a prison of your own past. This work isn't about minimalism or having a tidy home. It's about honesty. You think you're cleaning a room, but you're not. You're editing your own life story, one object at a time. You're finally deciding which chapters are over. You have boxes you don't open too, don't you? I'm not talking about cardboard. I'm talking about the career you're afraid to leave. The phone call you know you need to make. The apology you've been carrying for 10 years lodged in your throat like a stone. You packed those decisions, those difficult conversations up and put them in the attic of your mind because it was easier than dealing with them at the time. I get it. I truly do. But I'm 77. Let me tell you a secret from this end of the road. Those boxes get heavier every single year. They don't disappear. They just take up more and more space until there's no room left for you to actually live. You still have time, but it's not infinite. So here's my challenge to you. Not tomorrow, not next week, in the next 10 minutes. I want you to pick one, just one of those boxes. Open it. You don't have to solve it. You don't have to fix anything. You just have to have the courage to finally look inside. Remember that box of letters? The ones I found at the back of the closet, the ones I never answered? Last week, I finally did something about them. I took them out to the old fire pit in the backyard, the one I haven't used in years, and I lit a match. I watched the flames curl the edges of the first envelope and then the next. It wasn't an angry fire. It was a quiet one, a release. I wasn't destroying the evidence. I was finally sending a reply after 32 years of silence. The weight I carried my whole life wasn't in my things. It was in my avoidance. My reward for all this work isn't this clean room or the empty closet. It's the quiet in my own head. It's the space to finally just be here, now, looking out this window at the afternoon sun. Don't wait until you're 77 to start carrying only what's truly yours. If this conversation started something in you, well, maybe you should subscribe. It feels like we have more to talk about.